So here we are, episode 5 of the Vince McMahon Netflix docu-series. And we have one episode after this, so we're right at the end here. And this episode is about the family business. So I thought we had some pretty interesting tidbits in this episode. And I liked how it started off with Paul Heyman talking about Vince's childhood, that first 12 years in Vince's life, and how it kind of represents the major successes and failures in the WWF, the ups, the downs, the craziness, the zaniness, everything that was likely shaped over those years were something that kind of pseudo Vince experienced in the first 12 years of his life during his childhood. So I found that pretty interesting. The saying, hard times make hard people, diamond in the rough type deal. So that's how it felt when Paul Heyman was talking about that. And it kind of relates to the Playboy interview in 2001 that Vince did. And he mentioned in that interview that he got sexually assaulted by his mother, among many other things. And, I'm not trying to make excuses for Vince, by the way. This doesn't excuse the countless amount of shit that Vince McMahon has done over the past decades. But just saying, we likely know, the first 12 years of Vince's life, it's kind of unknown in quotes, but we have a lot of tidbits and little signals that it wasn't great, and it could have likely shaped who we know as Mr. McMahon today. So we then get a deeper look into Shane and Stephanie and how they got into the business. Shane used to sweep the ring, collect attire from wrestlers. He was even a referee at one point too. And then we have Stephanie. She said after graduating college, she quickly became an on-screen character, but she doesn't mention that she used to model in the early 90s, like WWF t-shirts, like the Rockers, Hogan, stuff like that. And we're also shown that Steph was a major heel shortly after getting hitched with Triple H on screen as part of that Las Vegas wedding where he drugs her, takes her through the wedding hall in Las Vegas, the drive-through, and becomes her on-screen husband. And Netflix doesn't hold back, man, because they show how Stephanie became that mega heel after that storyline and how the crowd would chant, slut, slut, slut. And Vince, he also had no problem with it because he saw it as more buzz and a way to capitalize to make money. So a classic Vince McMahon type of thing to do, So we then cut to Linda McMahon, who's of course Vince McMahon's wife, and she mostly handled the office and administration things off camera because she wasn't comfortable with being on camera and didn't find herself to be a good actress and things like that. So during this time, we get caught quite possibly one of her most famous storylines, and that's with Vince and someone called Trish Stratus. Now, Trish Stratus was a Canadian fitness model who got hired by the WWF in the year 2000, and Trish was basically Vince's love interest at the time, and Linda McMahon was bound to a wheelchair and hopped up on all kind of drugs that just made her like a total zombie at all times. So there was a segment where Linda was in the wheelchair all zombified, and then in front of her you had Vince and Trish, and they were totally swapping spit, making out over the top way, totally ridiculous, and Linda was just there zombified. Now apparently everybody was okay with this, Linda, Trish, Vince, etc., all except Shane McMahon, Vince's son. Now I'm talking about in real life too. Shane had heat about this. He didn't like what was happening, and ironically it led to a father versus son match at WrestleMania 17. And I gotta say, this match was freaking great. It's not a technical showpiece by any means, but in terms of the crowd, the storyline, everything attached to it. This was when wrestling was at its peak, pop culture wise, rating wise, everything like that. So you had that too. And it was so cool, man. So you had Shane and Vince fighting each other. It was like a street fight, no DQ, weapons, no holds barred. And we're getting to like the near end of the match, and Vince has a chair in his hand and he's about to lay Shane out for good, like he's about to take him out with the chair. And Linda's behind Vince in the wheelchair, all zombified still. So Vince is not thinking anything of it. So he's looking at Shane. He's going to take him out with the chair. But then Shane points behind Vince, and all of a sudden, Linda McMahon is slowly rising from the chair, like Frankenstein in a horror movie or something. And as she's rising, the crowd is going insane, like totally nuts. Vince McMahon then turns around, and he has a look of total shock on his face. And he's like, "What the?" And then Linda kicks him straight in the balls, and the crowd goes even more crazy. They totally go wild. So freaking awesome. Such a good moment. And very memorable. So that was really cool. And around this time, we get another on-screen moment on Raw or SmackDown or something like that. And Vince is telling Stephanie, his daughter, that Linda has a hard time keeping up with him in the bedroom. So, that's why he's hooking up with these younger, hotter divas to satisfy his needs. Now, the crazy thing about this is in that Playboy interview in 2001, he admits to cheating on Linda McMahon, his wife. And he's admitting that in real life, he's cheating on Linda with other women for sexual gratification, even though he regrets it emotionally. So he's saying that in the Playboy interview in 2001, as real Vince McMahon, like real life, he regrets it emotionally. It's a bad thing. He's cheating. It's wrong, so to speak. But then you have him on screen on SmackDown telling Stephanie McMahon, his daughter, but this is in character on the TV show, that I'm going to younger, hotter divas like Trish, Tori, etc. for sexual gratification to keep up with me. Do you see what I'm saying here? Do you see how the lines are blurred and how you would have a hard time accepting what is truth, what is fiction, who is Vince McMahon, who is Mr. McMahon? You know what I mean? So this is where it all comes from. It came from back then in the year 2001, and now in 2024, it's even more so. But then you have Vince McMahon saying he has absolutely no similarities with the character Mr. McMahon. Yeah, fucking right. Well, to go a bit deeper in the subject, Vince McMahon is then asked about Sable in 1999 and how she sued the company for sexual abuse. Now, Vince says he remembers nothing about this, and Sable was one of the biggest stars in the company in 1999. Not only that, but she sued the company for over $100 million. You're telling me Vince McMahon remembered nothing about that? Yeah, freaking right. So, what's even more ironic about this is that Sable ended up coming back to the WWE in 2003, and guess who one of her first storylines were with? That's right, none other than Vincent Kennedy McMahon. And that type of storyline, well, it was just like the Trish one a couple years prior. Vince and Sable together, swapping spit, making out, holding hands, laughing. How ironic, huh? I guess money heals all wounds, huh? So we had that craziness happen, and yeah, full circle, I guess. So we then get a story about how WCW went to shit in 2000/2001 and how Vince ended up buying them for $2.4 million. A hell of a deal. And then Vince also started the XFL, which was kind of like an extreme version of the NFL. And it was a pretty interesting concept at first. I remember watching it back in the day and being like legit excited. It was a more extreme version, you know, you had like cool player names and cool music and theme songs and stuff like that. But the thing was, like, a lot of players ended up getting injured because of how extreme, the rules were and the play style. And the ratings, they dropped really fast after the first episode to the point where it was just deemed a failure. So after that, we get a story about like Hogan and how he returned to the WWE in 2002 to wrestle The Rock at WrestleMania 18 in Toronto at the Skydome. And it doesn't surprise me that Vince hired Hogan back. Firstly, because Hogan was still a AAA name, massively popular. But not only that, but you got to remember back to the steroid trial in 1994, Hulk Hogan saved Vince McMahon's ass. So you see what I mean? Being in that position and, saving Vince at that time, Vince remembers everything. So Vince had no problem bringing Hogan back and booking him at the top and everything like that, you know what I mean? So we then go into Shane and Stephanie explaining how hard Vince was to them when it came to the business, especially the administration part that I mentioned earlier, them writing and having creative ideas. He would deny a lot of them, and he would just, make them work hard, and if not hard, even harder than some of the other office staff members, just to prove a point that, this isn't nepotism. They're my kids, but they're going to work just as hard as me, and if they're going to make it, they got to work as hard as me and stuff like that. So basically, Vince McMahon was not easy on his kids. So this then leads to one of the most chilling and crazy moments of the whole documentary, in my opinion. And it's of Vince McMahon and Shane McMahon discussing creative ideas over dinner. And it's narrated by Paul Heyman, who witnessed it. And Paul does a great job here. So you have Shane and Vince, they're discussing creative. Shane has a specific idea that he wants to get done. He keeps on telling Vince about it. Vince keeps saying no. The idea's crap. I don't like it. But Shane's pretty passionate. He's like, oh, why not? This idea. Well, I guess Vince McMahon eventually gets pretty irritated. So he takes his fork that he's eating with. He puts it on the table. He then looks at Shane. And Vince points to his own chest. And he says, right here, Shane. Right here. If you want your idea to happen so bad, well, take that fork and stab me right in the heart. Make it happen. And this is just so crazy, man. Like, oh my God. So Vince says that, and then he follows with, and if you don't stab me in the heart with the fork, then that shows me what type of man you are. And I'll take that into consideration too. So how can you win? It's a no-win situation. So Shane stabs Vince in the heart, he gets his idea done. But if he doesn't stab Vince in the heart, then he's a major pussy, according to Vince, and he loses in that regard too. So there's no winning. And Vince McMahon is a goddamn psycho. Is it clear yet? We're in episode 5. We're deep into the weeds. I think this is pretty evident from episode number 1, to be honest. But yeah, I cannot imagine how Shane McMahon felt in that moment as a son. Like, that is batshit crazy, man. So eventually Shane leaves the WWE in 2009 after many disagreements with his father, Vince. And he pretty much saw no hope in his future at that point because he had all these ideas, about buying UFC and purchasing ECW and streaming it. Lots of ideas and other creative ideas and other ways to run things or help run the company. But he didn't get it pretty much, so he ended up leaving the WWE in 2009. And this episode then ends with another cliffhanger, of course, about the scandals in the summer of 2022 and the ones that followed that. And we have like Vince McMahon smirking like the Grinch, kind of. That's what I noticed anyways. And yeah, what an episode. I personally came out of it feeling really bad, especially for Shane, because yeah, that whole narrative about Shane McMahon being the black sheep of the McMahon family, I mean, it seems kind of true, doesn't it? I don't know if it's like the editing by Netflix or the clips they showed or whatever, but the more and more you hear about Shane McMahon and his relationship to Vince's father, and then you add Stephanie and Triple H and how they kind of took more over and were suited for that takeover role compared to the son, Shane McMahon, I would think that black sheep kind of vibe, that lore, kind of rings true. You know what I mean? So now I wonder more than ever if Shane McMahon will really go to AEW, because this Netflix series is pretty hot. Shane McMahon's name is back in the news, back in the pro wrestling community for sure. So the whole timing, everything would be quite surreal. So that's it for episode 5, the family business stuff, and hopefully you enjoyed this review. If you could like the video or dislike the video, either way is cool. I appreciate the engagement and helping me get my channel out there and my videos out there. And feel free to drop comments below of what you think of this episode, the whole Shane McMahon stuff and all the zaniness and, you know, Sable, Trish, Vince, Crazy Mofo, etc. And appreciate all y'all watching, and I will see you in the finale, episode 6 of the Vince McMahon Netflix docu-series. Thanks again for watching. Catch y'all in the next one. Peace out.